Hello, bookworms. Welcome back to the Bonified Bookworm. I'm your host, Rachel, and if you're here, you are here to read along with me and hopefully improve your English. So, I don't have a book review today. We're just going to jump right in. I will say that, maybe I am a 1 week uploader. Maybe 2 weeks is too ambitious for me. I'm going to keep trying to do every Tuesday and Thursday, but it is working against me. Maybe I should do Wednesdays and Fridays or something. I don't know. But anyway, we're going to jump right into our book. We are reading, of course, Touching the Void by Joe Simpson. And when we left off, I think that they were getting ready to go to sleep, I think is what he was doing, or maybe they were going to try to get on down to another ledge. I'm a little confused on what they're trying to do, if they're trying to settle in for the night or get further down the mountain. So we will discover that together. All right. And of course, Joe has broken his leg. So he is climbing with one leg. So that just sounds horrible. But that's what they chose to do with their free time. So, the final choice, chapter 6. We're on page 85. I dug the bucket seat with frantic and nervous haste. The first lowering 300 feet down from the coal had worried me. It had been quite impossible to descend in a diagonal line to the right. Gravity had turned me into a dead weight, and no amount of scrabbling against the snow with ice axes had prevented a plumb vertical descent. The conditions on the face were markedly different from those on the slopes above the coal. Simon let me slide faster than I had expected, and despite my cries of alarm and pain, he had kept the pace of descent going. Which, I totally agree with Simon. I'd be like, we gotta get you down off this mountain. I'd be going as fast as possible, too. Let's see, I stopped shouting to him after 50 feet. The rising wind and continuous spindrift avalanches drowned out all communications. Instead, I concentrated on keeping my leg clear of the snow. It was an impossible task. Despite lying on my good leg, the crampons on the right boot snagged in the snow as the weight of my body pushed down. Each abrupt jerk caused searing pain in my knee. I sobbed and gasped, swore at the snow and the cold, and most of all at Simon. At the changeover point, I hopped onto my left leg after feeling the tugs on the rope and hammering the axe shafts into the snow, bent over them trying to think the pain away. It ebbed slowly, leaving a dreadful throbbing ache and a leaden tiredness. The tugs came again far too soon, and carelessly I slumped against the rope and let myself go. The drop went on until I could bear it no longer, yet there was nothing that I could do to bring the agony to an end. Howling and screaming for Simon to stop achieved nothing. The blame had to lie somewhere, so I swore Simon's character to the devil. I kept thinking the rope must come to an end, that I would stop at any moment, but it seemed to have doubled in length. The face here was much steeper than above the coal, steep enough to frighten me and make me think that Simon was barely in control. I couldn't ignore the thought of his seat collapsing and tensed up. I waited for the instant swooping acceleration that would tell me Simon had been pulled down and that we were dying. It didn't happen. The terrible sliding stopped, and I hung silently against the slope. 3 faint tugs trembled the taut rope, and I hopped up onto my leg. A wave of nausea and pain swept over me. I was glad of the freezing blasts of snow biting into my face. My head cleared as I waited for the burning to subside from my knee. Several times I had felt it twist sideways when my boot snagged, and each time the movement was unnatural. There would be a flare of agony as the knee kinked back and parts within the joint seemed to shear past each other with a sickening, grisly crunch. I had barely ceased sobbing before my boot snagged again. At the end, my leg shook uncontrollably. I tried to stop it shaking, but the harder I tried, the more it shook. I pressed my face into the snow, gritted my teeth, and waited. At last, it eased. Simon had already started to climb down, and the slack rope coiled past me as he descended. I looked up, but failed to make out where he was. A plume of snow boiled down, hugging the slope. I could see nothing through it. If anything, the spindrift was worse than before, and that could only mean that it had begun snowing heavily. Below me, the view was equally limited. I began digging Simon's belay seat. It was warming work and distracted attention from my knee. When I looked up again, Simon could be seen descending quickly. "At this rate, we should be down by 9 o'clock, he said cheerfully. "I hope so," I said. "I hope so." I said no more. It wouldn't help to harp on about how I felt. "Right, let's do it again." He had seated himself in the hold and had the ropes ready for another lowering. "You're not hanging around, are you?" "Nothing to wait for, come on." He was still grinning and his confidence was infectious. Who said one man can't rescue another, I thought. We had changed from climbing to rescue, and the partnership had worked just as effectively. We hadn't dwelt on the accident. There had been an element of uncertainty at first, but as soon as we had started to act positively, everything had come together. "Okay, ready when you are," I said, lying on my side again. "Slow down a bit this time. You'll have my leg off otherwise." He didn't seem to hear me, for I went down at an even faster pace than before, and the hammering torture began again with a vengeance. My optimism evaporated. I could think of nothing but enduring until the changeover. It came after an age, but the brief respite was too short, and before the agony had eased, I was sliding down again. I pressed my hands against the snow, vainly trying to lift my leg away from the surface. The axes dangled from their loops around my waist, and my hands froze. My legs snagged. There was nothing I could do. The muscles had seized up. I tried and tried again to lift it clear of the snow, but it fused into lumpy dead weight. I clenched my thigh muscles in an attempt to lift it clear, but nothing happened. It was no longer a part of me. It snagged and snagged again, twisted, kinked, and caused every sort of agony, until I gave up trying and lay limp against the moving snow, sobbing. The lowering continued. I forgot about it ending and gave myself up to the pain. It swamped around my knee and ran up my thigh, infusing all my conscious thoughts with its heat. It pitched higher with every jolt, insisting on attention, becoming something endowed with its own individuality, until I could hear its message clearly. "I'm hurt. I'm damaged. Rest. Leave me be." The movement stopped abruptly. 3 tugs trembled down. I stood up, shaking. I tried to grab the axe to begin digging the next bucket seat, but couldn't grip the shaft. When I had made it stay in my mitt, it flopped from side to side. I tried picking up the hammer with the same result. I tugged my right mitt but couldn't hold it tight enough to get it off, and eventually ripped it free with my teeth. The blue thermal gloves stayed on my hand, ice frosted onto the fabric. Even through the gloves, I could see how wooden my fingers had become. They moved stiffly and all together and refused to curl into a fist. Spindrift poured down the surface of the slope, filling the mitt which hung from its loop on my wrist, while I held my hand under my armpit inside my jacket. The searing pain of returning blood was all I could think about. Even the mushy agony in my lower leg waned before this frightful burning heat in my fingers. I'm just making up my own words. When it eased, I emptied my mitt, put the gloved hand back into it, and repeated the process with the other hand. Simon came down before I had half finished digging his belay seat. He waited silently, head bowed. When I looked at him, I saw that he had both hands in his armpits. Mine were real bad. I thought they were frostbitten, I said. "It's just the lowering. They really freeze up when I'm lowering. Can't get my middle fingers to warm. They've gone all together." He had his eyes tight closed, fighting the hot aches. A heavier burst of spindrift sprayed over him, but he ignored it. It partially filled the seat I had been digging. I swept it clear with the side of my arm. "Come on, it's getting bad. We'll have to hurry." I lay beneath his feet, and when the rope came taut, I shifted my weight off my foot and tensed against the prospect of another drop. He let me down with a rush, and I cried out as my boot caught in the snow. I was looking at him when I cried out. He remained expressionless and continued to lower me. He had no time for sympathy. By the end of the 4th drop, I had deteriorated. The shaking in my leg was continuous and unstoppable. The pain had reached a level beyond which it wouldn't go. It remained constant whether I snagged my leg or not. Curiously, it had become more bearable, for I no longer winced and tensed at the prospect of catching my foot. I could adjust to the steady pain. My hands, however, were much worse. The rewarming repeated at the end of every lowering was less effective each time. Simon's hands were even worse than mine. The storm had steadily increased until the spindrift flowed continually down the slope and threatened to push me off when I dug the seats. The wind gusted across the face, blasting the snow into exposed skin and forcing itself through the tiniest of openings in clothing. I was close to exhaustion. As the drops continued, I lapsed into resigned tolerance. The object of the lowering had long since escaped me. I couldn't think any further ahead than simply enduring the present. Simon said nothing at the changeovers, his expression fixed and rigid. We had locked ourselves into a grim struggle. My part was pain-racked. Simon's an endless physical battle to get me down almost 3,000 feet without a break. I wondered how often it occurred to him that the seats might collapse at any moment. I was beyond caring about such things, but Simon knew all the time that he could descend alone quite safely if he chose. I began to thank him for what he was doing, and then quickly stopped myself. It would only emphasize my dependence on him. All right, we're going to stop there on page 89, and hopefully I will post on Tuesday like I'm supposed to. And if not, then maybe I will post an extra video on a random day, since I can't seem to keep to the Tuesday-Thursday schedule. So I hope you all have a great day or week, depending on when you're watching this, and I'll see you next time. Bye.